Hello, Church of SDFU here. So in this video I'm just going to briefly go through the reasons why I think intervention in Libya is a good thing in my opinion. So first I want to just talk about the objections that people have been making to intervention in Libya. So there's been a couple of different points put forward. The first being intervention in other areas would be more desirable. Take the Sudan, take Congo, take Ethiopia, take the Ivory Coast. Why didn't we intervene in Rwanda? And I agree. There are places in the world where intervention is more desirable. But there's no political will to intervene there. And so intervening in Libya doesn't mean we're taking away peacekeepers from the Congo or the Sudan. There's not going to be any intervention there anytime soon. And in some of these cases, any such intervention would be vetoed by China or Russia anyways. So if we went in there, then we'd have to do so without a UN mandate, which a lot of people, myself included, find troubling. So in summary to this argument, whilst I agree that there are other places where it would be better to intervene, we should judge this intervention on its own merits and its own faults, rather than based on some ideal place where we would like to intervene. The second point many people make is the ulterior motives of the participants in this intervention. And again, I agree. There are ulterior motives which I think trump the humanitarian objectives, which are stability in the Middle East and getting rid of an annoying, unpredictable leader in an oil-rich country. But that doesn't actually change the case for intervention. And for once, there's a UN mandate here. This is not a US lone wolf operation like Iraq was, like Afghanistan was. This is a sanctioned intervention, which the world community agreed to. And I think the reason why Russia and China are now pretending like they actually wanted to veto it is because they want to basically play both sides, and whatever side will win, they can say, well, we supported you. So they're just playing a political game by saying that. So to this point, again, I would say, judge the intervention by its own merits or its own faults. The exact ulterior motives of the different powers shouldn't really influence our decision unless they're detrimental to the final humanitarian objective. Now the third point I've heard is we're forcing Gaddafi's hand by intervening militarily. So he's forced to use a more extreme approach than he would if, I guess, we just talked or sent in observers or something. It's important to remember that this uprising started before the intervention. So it wasn't like we encouraged the uprising. People put their lives on the line all by themselves. And hundreds were killed in those first few days of the uprisings, mostly unarmed civilians. Also, journalists in Libya have been abducted for trying to report on the situation. Given the record of observers when the host government does not want them to observe things, they can just not give them security to places. It's been done so often, and it doesn't work unless you have total cooperation of the leader in question, and I don't see why Gaddafi would have cooperated any more then than he is now. And finally, this whole thing is a bit of a slippery slope. If the principle is that we can't help a people when it makes the authority figures angry and risks creating a powerful response, then we're not going to do any helping, because we're always going to be up in these kind of struggles against dictators who, when they're threatened, will use other means. And to those people, I think that Gaddafi would have, I don't know, abdicated or given the people in the territories that are rising up, their own state. I mean, come on, get real. Seriously. That was never Gaddafi's option. And he still has plenty of places he can go with his billions of dollars that would be happy to have him if he wanted to go into exile. So I really don't buy that point at all. The fourth point that people make is missiles don't protect civilians. Well, certainly a missile can't guard a safe territory like a peacekeeper boots on the ground can. But they can destroy tanks, they can destroy airfields, they can destroy supply dumps, they can destroy fuel supplies. And heavy equipment requires a complex supply infrastructure, the disruption of which will impair the deployment of that equipment into combat areas, most of which in Libya are cities that house civilians. Missiles can do this. And without missiles, resistance in Libya will look like this. And I have no faith in the Libyan government that they will show any restraint towards the provinces, the parts of the country that have gone into uprising. Gaddafi's history does not indicate this. Why do I think we should intervene? Well, I think there are several reasons. Gaddafi has in the past killed political prisoners in the town square as a message to others. In this conflict, it's believed that he's killing soldiers that refuse to shoot civilians. He's put his defense minister in jail for refusing to give order to kill civilians. He's hired mercenaries, and again this is known fact, to prevent Egypt-like dissent within the military. And he set up an enormous secret police network that makes political dissent virtually impossible and extremely risky to one's life. So political solutions, political movements are extremely difficult and dangerous for Libyans to organize. Just in this conflict, he has, of course, this army of tanks, aircraft, and artillery at his disposal. And he's already killed hundreds of civilians, unarmed civilians, in the first days of the conflict. And I think that really foreshadows what's going to happen if we allow him to do what he wants with the country, to bring it back firmly into his grasp. Why to intervene? Because, and I think this is the most important reason, a large part of the Libyan population, as you can see on this map, the cities that have stood up and kicked out Gaddafi's forces, a large part of the Libyan population wants to be free of Gaddafi's dictatorship. And I think they should be allowed to decide without Gaddafi's iron fist breaking their face for it. And these people do not have the same number of tanks and the same number of planes. So, in a conflict, a regular conflict, they will be defeated. So we can do different things. We can supply them with huge amounts of weapons, which I think is probably a far worse strategy, because then there's just going to be more weapons in the region. We can give them tanks, and then there's going to be more tanks. Or we can try to use military power to stop Gaddafi's heavy equipment and balance the playing field, so to say. Or we can just wish them well and watch them be dismantled by Gaddafi's army. I think those are our choices. If there are more choices, I'd love to hear about them, but the idea that just exerting some moderate amount of political pressure on a leader that's been in charge as long as Gaddafi has, and has such a history of not giving a toot about what the international community says, is hopelessly optimistic. What's my formula for deciding whether I'm in favor or not for this intervention? Well, there's really only one variable I'm interested in. If and only if the intervention prevents more suffering than it causes, that is grounds to support the intervention, humanitarian grounds. And the humanitarian grounds are the only ones I care about. So if you're arguing for the intervention, you'll have to show that it prevents more suffering than it causes. If you're arguing against the intervention, you're going to have to show that it causes more suffering than it prevents. Otherwise, your objections are just missing the point, unless humanitarian concerns are not your primary concerns, which of course is an entire different kettle of tea. And just stating that it's the case that this intervention will cause more harm than good isn't really good enough. And the things I've gone through, the willingness of the Libyan people to put their lives on the line, the violence Gaddafi showed pre-intervention, those are things that I really put onto the side of we're actually doing more to prevent suffering than causing it. Anyways, I'd love to hear your opinion on the situation in Libya. This was Church of STFU. See you guys all later.